Hello friends, Ma Devi here. I am on recording this morning about our Sacred Earthworks trip to Italy that four of the bishops took in these past 2 weeks. I know that you've been following our photos on Facebook, but I wanted to put together a more detailed presentation of what we did, what we saw, what we learned, and the impact that it had. So I hope that you enjoy this. I've made a slideshow presentation. It can't possibly cover everything that happened or everything that we did because we were there for 2 weeks, but I wanted to give you an overview and once again another kind of training on the earthworks practices that we're doing as Christian mystics when we travel to such places. So let me share the screen with you, share my slideshow presentation. Okay, I think you can see that now. So here we are, the four bishops, Amma Ruth, Master Isabella, Mother Beatrice, and myself. That's a photo of us at St. Peter's Basilica in Vatican City, Rome. And this was one of the first stops that we made, actually the second stop after the Pantheon in Rome. We decided to travel in clerics, which is a little bit unusual for some to see, and something that we decided to do so that we would be available to bless people as we traveled and to start doing our intercessory prayer and our consciousness raising from the moment of travel. So that's why you see us in clerics. And as you know, in our former order, several of us, or all of us, wore clerics, Mother Beatrice and myself and others who had been part of that particular spiritual group. So we started our first day in Rome at the Pantheon. The word Pantheon means all gods, and it is this building with the columns here down the left-hand corner. I encourage you to watch this on a bigger screen than your phone so you can see these images because I packed quite a few pictures into each page. This temple to all gods was built in 27 BC, so before Christ, and it was honoring the seven planetary deities and built by Marcus Agrippa. And then it burned down and was rebuilt in 126 AD by King Hadrian, and eventually in 609 AD became the Basilica of St. Mary and the Martyrs. So interesting things about this construction, the pillars, the ancient Roman look of the building, the obelisk that's out front of the building with the 16-pointed star at the top, and images that are Egyptian on the obelisk itself, which you can also find at St. Peter's Basilica, the Vatican. There's sacred geometry all around this place, and the floor, that big circle on the floor, is the center under which this oculus, this hole that goes out into the sky, is open. And that oculus is in the center of a concrete dome, which was built in 126 AD, which is pretty amazing that that vaulted ceiling is still there. And the oculus serves as a portal of light, similar to what we envision in our Avalon temple, our interdimensional temple. And so they have the center of this space in the Pantheon cordoned off, so you can't go and stand right underneath that oculus, which I think is very interesting. And I think some of you heard me say that the same thing happened when I went to the Capitol building in Washington, that they had that space cordoned off, and when I tried to stand underneath of it, I was asked to move. Even though it was open, there were cords on either side, it was open, people were walking through, but I stopped purposefully, and they didn't really like that. So what I thought was really interesting about the Pantheon is that over time and across cultures, this particular place and this particular dome and portal has been used by many cultures and religions over time. So it's one of the things that when we look at earthworks and we look at the trajectory of religion, politics, power over time, there are these secret understandings about structures, about domes, about pillars, about saints and angels and giants and other things that have been translated from one generation to the other based on what the power structure of that particular culture was willing to share with with the masses. Many of the secret societies, including the Christian mystical societies like Rosicrucians and Cathars, and they didn't share their information with just anyone because it's powerful, and also the average person either doesn't have much interest in it or might use it in ways that would not be constructive. So down in the lower right-hand corner, you see that sculpture and paintings of giant humanoids next to adult humans. So in the Pantheon, in St. Peter's Basilica at the Vatican, in many other places, we noticed that there were artistic expressions of giants. Now it says that these are people with children, but when you look closely at these, the smaller person in these images, they are actually adult people. So that's something that we are going to talk about some, and I want to give credit to Freddie Silva and his work about the giants in Sardinia and across Europe, and also, of course, to David Hawkins, who we've been studying in terms of the raising of consciousness. So these places, these power places, are places where we can raise consciousness, where we can have an experience of raised consciousness, much like we do in our chapels when we have prepared them for sacraments and initiations, and the energy in the space is very vibrant and high vibration. So one of the things that we saw in all these different places were domes, also called kamara or naragi, vaulted chambers. So the first one is the oculus at the Pantheon. The ones in the center here are internal and external domes at St. Peter's Basilica. And finally to the right, the Naragi Dome, or as Freddie Silva calls it, Ascension Chambers. That these are all places that are meant to, when you stand under them, have a particular energy that opens the crown chakra, opens the pineal gland, opens a threshold between the physical and spiritual worlds. Whether that is something that is relating to something we call religious or otherwise, that is the form that creates a space that would allow our crown and pineal gland to open to have interaction with the other worlds. Now, sometimes that interaction has been monitored by the powers that be in different cultures and religions. But you can go to these places and have these experiences and recognize that what they're really trying to do is create space in humanity to be the kind of human that traverses between the physical and the spiritual world. And of course, as ministers in the mystical Christian tradition, we are doing that all the time as we're providing sacraments, initiations, as we're doing intercessory prayer and other things that we'll talk about in a minute here. So sacred geometry and symbols are part of what we noticed in all different places that we traveled to, along with the domes. There were flower of life images, hexagons, tetrahedrons, spirals, the pine cone, which is the same as a lotus would be in the east in terms of the crown chakra, opening the crown chakra, the eight-pointed stars. So these are all images of sacred geometry and symbols that we found in all kinds of different places. Now, most of these that I've represented here were at either St. Peter's Basilica or other Catholic churches. But you'll see that those are repeated when we go into the Naragis, which are the ancient temples that we visited on Sardinia. One of the reasons that we were doing this traveling is to ignite ley lines and to redirect the power of water, the feminine power of water. So you can see in the first map here at the center of it is Sardinia, and the central point of all of those ley lines happens to be Tharos, where we stayed in an Airbnb, and this ancient church down here at the bottom is in Sardinia, the Church of St. John of Sinis, which is the Holy See of the Catholic Church, which it's a very broken down church, and it has the remnants of a well on the outside of it. So many of the places that we visited this year and in other years, we've been reigniting the feminine, which often has to do with water and wells. So the external well was broken down, covered over, but inside, you can see Mother Beatrice here lying on the floor, because interestingly, inside this church, there was a big glass plate on the floor. It was quite dirty in there, so we cleaned it off, And then each of us took turns lying down on this glass plate to reignite the movement of water, so the water lines into this chapel, into this church, because it was chosen as the Holy See, which is quite a big deal. It's the seat of the bishop on this island, and there's no question and no coincidence that it was built over other ancient sites and that it is the place where those ley lines cross in this part of the world. And on the upper right hand, you see this map of the the ley line of St. Michael. It starts in Ireland and then goes to England. And then there's Mont Saint Michel. And here's an image down here of Mother Beatrice and I last year at Mont Saint Michel in France, where we did these same kind of earthworks. And this time we were down here in Italy at Monte Sant'Angelo, which is another point on that ley line. And this line is called the Sword of Michael. So St. Michael's sword. And his image is in a monastery or sanctuary in every one of these places on this line. It starts in Ireland and ends at Mount Carmel in Israel. And so our intention there was to, between those 2 points, the one that we had sparked in Mont Saint Michel, and then the one that we were going to here in Monte Sant'Angelo, to recreate the line, the sword on that line. All the places along the way, we were planting pillars of light in each of those places, connecting them and connecting with the energy of the sword of Michael that brings peace to the world. So that's what our earthworks was in that place. So increasing the feminine, reestablishing the ley lines and the power places. And certainly we're not the only people on the planet who are doing this, but we're doing our bit as we move along. And what we're doing and how we're doing it is that we are going to these places, some of them religious places, like St. Peter's Basilica and the Cathedral of St. Gennaro in Napoli, and many other churches, as you see if you were looking at the videos, the pictures that we sent. This one down here is us at the Parthenon. So what we do is we go into a place, tune into the energy of the place, get into the sacred domes or niches that are there to feel the energy and align with it. And we begin by doing reparations with the spirit of that place. The angels, the giants, the saints, the martyrs. We do that by prayer, by chant, and by song. Depending on where we are, we have to choose what we can do. Some places that had a lot of people in them, we couldn't do things out loud, so we did silent prayers. But the motivation for that and the impact of that was reconnecting with the spirit of the place and the spirit of the people who had lived in that place or the saints that the place was dedicated to. So here we have St. Gennaro's bones, the ossuary, in the basement of the Cathedral of Napoli, and very, very powerful place, full of sacred geometry, full of Egyptian symbology, and full of power. And so there we are in the front of this relic. You know, relic is a charged object, the relic of the bones of St. Gennaro of Napoli. And that was quite a powerful experience. And part of that reparation is that it's a two-way communication. It's a conversation. Our spirit with the spirit of the place. So there was St. Gennaro, who came to us and was very pleased that we had come, very kind and generous toward us, blessing us even as we were blessing his martyrdom and his work on the planet and his work in Napoli as the saint of the city, who continues to bless the city. Many of these places are seen as tourist attractions now rather than sacred spaces, and so we were one of the few people doing this kind of work, praying or connecting, as far as we could see and feel anyway. So going to these places with intention brings the spirit of these angels and saints and giants and martyrs to that doorway, that liminal space that we create by our consciousness, and we commune with those beings in these spaces. And then we acknowledge and reconcile with them, you know, just feeling with them. Saint Gennaro is the patron saint of Napoli, but the people in Napoli have turned away from the church to a great degree, and so it's there's a sadness about that, a sadness about this is a place where people could be blessed and become a blessing, and they're not utilizing it as well as they might. And so having us come and acknowledge that is a beautiful exchange. And then we use the pillar of light, reconnecting the center of heaven to the center of earth in that place, reconnecting and enhancing, magnifying the energy of that saint's work in that area, and feeling his response. Very pleased from the spiritual side of things that we were willing to do that, that we could see and feel and engage with them. And so that was one of the examples of a very powerful experience. And then we're doing intercessory prayer to release souls. So the particular intercessory prayers that we used were St. Gertrude's Prayer and the Chaplet of Divine Mercy, which are both very specific prayers using the sacrifice of Jesus's life in order to amplify the prayer for the release of souls who are stuck to the earth. And as you know from our former conversations, people's beings, people's energy, their soul gets stuck close to the earth for lots of reasons. And when we're doing the intercessory prayer, it's releasing them to return to spirit. And that's the work that we're doing there. So you can see that here we are doing that with Mother Beatrice in the wheelchair with Amma Ruth and Master Isabella in one of the under one of the domes at the at St. Peter's Basilica. And then down the bottom here, we were at the Pantheon. Here's an image of the giants from Sardinia in the lower left-hand corner, which was there was a cast of that on the wall at the place we were staying at in Tharos, and that looks a lot like the giant heads that you find in Easter Island and such. And then down to the right here are the Naragis, and this first one is the space. These two in the center here are the cave of the Sibyl of Kuma, and the Sibyl is a giant prophetess who the kings and sages of her time went to for wisdom and advice, and she was the oracle. And then the caves to the right, some of these are the domes, the feminine domes, and then the Naragi, which we'll talk about more. But in every one of these places, we aligned ourselves with the spirit. So we had experience of angels in these places, experiences of the Sibyl, experiences of the giants of the Naragi era, and opening those liminal spaces between the conscious material world and the numinous spiritual world. This one I put in because we had a lot of experience seeing the stars. Master Isabella got us all these beautiful scarves with stars on them. So as we went around, sometimes we wore those, sometimes we wore clerics. And we were followed around with some beautiful bright skies by the stars that were in the sky during our visit, particularly Orion, Sirius, the Pleiades, Arcturus, and then we got to see stars in a lot of other places. We got to see this globe at St. Peter's Basilica. There was all the constellations. So just recognizing the overlay of constellations and the outer universe with our experience here in this dimension, and moving through life in this dimension. So these forgotten giants, angels, and saints, we were able to visit their places and commune with them in spirit. This is Saint Gennaro, and Saint Gennaro was martyred because he came to the prisons in I don't know if it was Rome or Naples. I think Naples. And some of his deacons had been arrested and were going to be killed, and he went to visit them and pray with them, and he was arrested as well. They tried to kill him by, so the story goes, they tried to kill him by having him fed to the lions, but the lions would not eat him. They laid down at his feet, so instead they beheaded him. And there were one of the people that were his followers collected some of his blood, and so they have two samples of blood that of course has hardened over time, and they keep it underneath this image on the altar, and that blood is taken out 3 times a year, and there's a miracle that happens where the blood becomes liquid again, and it is a sign of blessing of Saint Gennaro over the city. And thousands and thousands of people come out. Sometimes the Pope goes there to to be the one who sees the miracle. And it doesn't always happen, but it does happen quite regularly and inspires the people of that area, which has been downtrodden and economically challenged for a long time. Also in Napoli, this man here who was a soccer player with a halo around his head, Diego Maradona, who became kind of the savior of Naples. And interestingly, his face is all over the city. There are statues and paintings. This one with the halo. There's one where he has the hat of a bishop. So he became the modern saint of the city, someone who came to the city for a number of years and brought pride and hope back to the people of the city that they had lost. And it said, and they call him Dios. Is not he was the number 10, so D for Diego, and then number 10, and they put an S on the end, and they called him Dios, which I think is a really interesting expression of the falling apart of the church as the place where people found hope, and instead they have find hope in this popular athlete who came and brought them some renown and some pride in their city. Again, the image of the giants that we communed with in Sardinia. We had many experiences, energetic and spiritual experiences there. We did the same things, which is to commune with the beings, commune with the space, reconcile and put in the pillar of light and reconnect with the brilliance of these beings. And not only connecting so we can release souls from the earth, but also opening the way for these beings, which again, Freddie Silva calls the giants, but the shining ones, which we might consider angels or saints in our Christian tradition, beings who have come over time to inform and bless humankind and bring us into greater consciousness. The blessings of beings like angels, like the angel Michael here at the bottom, which we saw at Castle Saint Angelo in Rome. The saints like Padre Pio, who we also had a beautiful experience with at San Giovanni Rotondo, where he is laid to rest. And when he became a saint, they exhumed him and put him in a glass chamber there. His body actually wasn't on display when we were there, but we all felt his spirit very closely, and he spoke with us and thanked us for coming. And it was very sweet. That exchange was very sweet. And we did the same thing: reconcile, amplify the energy, release the souls, all of those same kind of spiritual practices that would allow for people, for beings, souls to be released, for openness for angels to come, for the expansion of the blessings of the place, and to bring more light to the planet, to bring more light and consciousness to the planet, which is our goal, of course, as mystics, to become light and to bring light. And so that was a beautiful place to do that with Padre Pio, whom you all know that I love. The woman up in the corner here, the Sibyl of Kumai, she also was very pleased that we went there. We sang the Ajit Kar song, Ma, the light of your grace, and she very quickly responded to that, and we had an experience, an exchange with her as a giantess, both energetically and in her wisdom. And this place that she had, this cave, had a dome in it that was just another ascension chamber, another place where the energy was just magnificently amplified. That opening that threshold, opening that liminal space to commune with this being who then blessed us in different ways, each of us in different ways, which I'll talk about at another time. I don't want to get too into what happened to us individually, but just that these places and our efforts and our intentions allowed for that exchange between the third dimension and the dimension that these saints and angels and giants are living in. So then we have the angel down here, the huge angels in Rome that are lining both sides of the bridge that go to the castle of St. Angelo, or St. Michael's Castle. And then again at the bottom here, a saint with a giant with a small human that looks like they're the helper or caretaker of that person. So a lot of our experience that we had to do with these beings, not just the space and the place, but also the beings of these places. And as many of you know, I have had lots of experience with with deceased beings, with dead folks. And so I went to find Diego Maradona and thank him for his efforts. He did a lot of really good philanthropic work in Naples, and he wasn't there for a huge amount of time, but he loved the city, and he was a fantastic soccer player, which of course brought people a lot of joy. So the ability as we grow in consciousness and connection with the spirit world to do this kind of work from this side, because we have free will, we have the opportunity to open these liminal spaces, opening these portals, and be a conduit for energy to move from this dimension to the next dimension. And whether you call that dimension heaven, the universe, the galaxies, whatever you call it, when you get there, you know that you're having an experience with beings who are not in the third dimension. And so, and those experiences, have been very beautiful, uplifting, and encouraging us to continue this kind of work. So as you all know, I never set out to do this work. It just kind of came upon me, but it seems really appropriate and lovely. And one of the things that we're trying to do in all of these different places is to honor the divine feminine. So we noted that there are images, some of them you see here, of the Sibyl of Mother Mary. Up in the left-hand corner is the well, the sacred well at Santa Cristina in Sardinia. And if you look at this from the opposite direction, it looks very much like the feminine genitalia, and you walk downstairs into a well. And this point at the top is a hole that shines light down into the well. So another chamber, another pillar where ritual was done for women. And having that, the ability to go down into that space that is very old, thousands and thousands of years old. Here's Mother Beatrice in the first chapel at Tharos on Sardinia, as we are reigniting the feminine there in that chapel. And then in San Severo, Mother Beatrice and I in front of the Black Madonna, who is the symbol of the unmanifest creative force of the universe. Before everything, the unmanifest feminine out of which all matter arises. We weren't able to go into that chapel. It wasn't open when we were there, so we bought flowers and left them there and said some prayers and did the work from a little bit of a distance, but felt her presence nonetheless. What we noticed in a lot of these places is that there are a lot of dry wells. The holy water founts in many cathedrals are empty. We're assuming that has to do with COVID, although when Mother Beatrice and I went to Chartres last year, there was water in those holy water fonts. And then baptismal fonts. So the wells and the water moving around at the base of this Santa Cristina well, there is still water there. So water is the feminine element, and part of what we did in some of these places is to use water to bless. We brought selenite to bring the feminine energy in. We prayed for the movement of energy of the feminine to be restored to places where the kind of toxic power structure of the masculine had taken over, and to create a balance, that balance that's required both in us individually and collectively. So we did this work to heal the feminine, and as Mother Beatrice informed us that the feminine has to be healed before the masculine can be healed. So at the cave of the Sibyl, at this Domus de Junas in Sardinia, this dome of rock with caverns in it. You can see us in front of it here. We went into each of these caverns. Each one of the caverns is for a different part of the life cycle of the feminine. So first the child, then the budding sexuality of the feminine, then menarche, then motherhood and birth and motherhood, and then the crone. And so he went into each of these, used water, selenite, prayer, song, some dance to reestablish that. And in each cave, creating a pillar of light that sent out the reparation, the healing in the world of the feminine that had been oppressed and abused and damaged through all of time. This is a very, very ancient site. And so being able to do that for so far back and into the present felt very powerful and I don't know what word. It was awesome. It was an awesome thing to participate in. It was beautiful, and we were able to get Mother Beatrice up into two of the caves. They were a little bit hard to climb into, some of them. And then here, the four female bishops at St. Peter's Basilica in clerics, all of us received communion. They gave communion to all of us. Doesn't always happen when you're wearing clerics in a Catholic or Anglican space, but we were there, and we all felt the spirit of that place and all of the power of that tradition, even though it has been used in some very negative ways, the power of the truth of that space and those saints and beings who were doing things for real, that they were very pleased that we were there, and blessed us with being served the Eucharist in the Catholic Church at St. Peter's Basilica, the heart of the Catholic Church. And this is the same week, right before that, Pope Francis had sent out an encyclical declaring that more women need to be in the church authority. And then we were served communion there at St. Peter's, which was quite profound for those of us who are independent priests and bishops and who sometimes struggle with the world negating our spiritual authority. And to have that happen was quite profound and beautiful. So this was all healing the heart, healing the feminine, so that then we could turn toward healing the masculine. And I meant to put a few more images in here, but after we went to the domes, Master Isabella and I crossed the street, and this Naragi here was on the other side. You can see it's broken down, and unfortunately we don't have a picture of the other side of it. But when we went to the other side of it, it was caved in and blackened. And I got the distinct feeling that this was a representation of the male ego trauma and that creates toxic masculinity. And that was the shape that the masculine was in, broken down and burnt from the inside. So when the feminine can be reignited and inspired to nurture and care for those, even those who oppressed and abused and held down women for the purposes of power, money, force, religion, keeping people down and away from these sacred sites, it just was so moving to have compassion arise and say the masculine needs to be healed. And so the uprising of the feminine in us individually and collectively, can help the masculine then to heal, so that the sacred masculine can come forward, which is a whole nother way of caring for creation. The masculine is meant to be caring for creation. The feminine is the creative force, and the masculine cares for it. So healing the toxic masculinity, healing the toxic power structures of many, many systems that we live in that are starting to crumble and be restructured in the way that we talk about, where we can have an impact on creating the more beautiful world our hearts know is possible. When women heal, we turn and heal the men, even the men that harmed us, and that's the way of the feminine. And so we could see that the work that we were doing there, especially as 4 female bishops, and then the other 4 female bishops that we have in our group were supporting us in prayer and energetically and spiritually. So we were all linked together, magnifying all this work, all this healing work that we were doing in all these places. And remembering that the divine feminine and the sacred masculine are inextricable from one another. As Thich Nhat Hanh says, the whole cosmos has come together to create you. The cosmos, the flesh, the earth, the feminine, the spirit, the masculine, joined together, the sign of the cross at the heart. This is our humanity. And the work that we do in this Earthworks, this sacred work, is to restore humanity to that balance. That's why we call ourselves Sacred Balance. And also to the integration of them, so that we can really live in that more beautiful world. And that's what all of these places were built to help us do, to come back to that knowing of ourselves. The Christian initiatory way to ascension and interdimensional travel is to use the sacraments, to use the chapels, to use the initiations, to ignite the crown chakra, the pineal gland. And you can see in these images here, here's Mary Magdalene with the skull. The skull, we were very interested in the skull showing up in so many places. And then I got a message from the giants that said the skull is the ascension chamber of humankind. Because, you're opening the pineal gland and the crown chakra, and you see the halo on Jesus, the halo on this saint. I thought this image was really interesting of the lion man with wings and the snake rising up him. So again, ascension, 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 and here all these images of the eye of Horus, the pineal gland, the pine cone, and hidden in plain view, as they say. So in Christianity, in mysticism, we use the sacraments, we use the initiations to increase the energy in the upper chakras, the heart chakra, of course, and then starting with love, and then going to the pineal gland where we can have wisdom and gnosis, and in that knowing, open our crown and become conduits of light, become conduits of prayer, become beings that can go places and be a pillar of light for that place, for those people in those chapels, in those experiences and exchanges, and becoming the true humans. The true humans, or the new humans, or the Christed civilization. And the communion of saints and the giants in Christianity were doing the same thing. You see here at the right, this is from St. Gennaro's Cathedral. There's Jesus in the Vesica Piscis at the top, Mother Mary and the apostles, the saints and angels. This is the climbing the ladder into heaven. And then here is at Sacré-Cœur in Paris, Jesus there, sign of the cross with the Sacred Heart of Jesus, and all of the saints and angels and beings who, in different levels of power and largesse or giantess, are expressed in that mosaic, that fabulous and mosaic at Sacré-Cœur. And I just wanted to end with this artwork of Alex Gray. So here's an image of the Christ. His head alighted, his aura alighted, his hand and heart and feet alighted with blessing through the work that he did to become conscious. And then here you have an image of a human being that portal from the spiritual to the physical. So we are the bridge. Our energetic system is the bridge. When we open our third eye, here's a really interesting image of the third eye. When we open our third eye, there's the flower of life. There's our consciousness of being light beings, spiritual beings, returning to our physical form so that we can carry the Christ light in us. We can use it in prayer, as in this image. You can see the intention. There's the pineal gland and the radiation of light and intention from the heart. And here is one of those images like the oculus. So this is a way that you can see a dome there, and you can feel it pulling on your crown. Here's someone who is using their consciousness to tap into the Christ grid, so the grid around the planet that is the energy of the mind of Christ. And these other images similarly, losing your sense of yourself as just physical and having an experience of being not just a spiritual being, but spirit. And here with the flower of life at the heart and above the crown. So these are all fantastic sacred artwork from Alex Gray that express what these places do to us, and also what our participation in this process of ascending consciously and spiritually, and for those of us who are ministers vowed to love, vowed to light, vowed to the way of the Christ, use this power to amplify good, to amplify light, to help raise consciousness, to help alleviate suffering. And as we learned from David Hawkins, the more people who take on this kind of consciousness, the more it tips the scales as the rising tide lifts all boats, and human consciousness as a whole rises up and moves back toward the truth of our nature. And that is what the mystics do, right? To ring the gong of truth, ring the gong of we are beings of light and love here for a reason. And when we are allowing ourselves and engaging ourselves in this transformative process, in this ascension process, trying not to leave the planet while carrying as much light and consciousness as we can in our being, then we become portals of that. And when we move around the planet, the energy of that is catchy and it blesses, and the people that we're with get blessed. And then we visit places such as these to reignite them, to release souls, to open the way between heaven and earth um, through all of these earthworks that are expressions of our collective desire to transform and transcend our lower sense of self, our material, scientific material sense of self. And then, of course, as vowed ministers, to alleviate suffering and to raise the consciousness of humankind. So, this is what we've been doing for these 2 weeks. We thank you all for sending your energy to us and for praying for us and for filling in for us and doing the sacraments and prayers during these 2 weeks. I'm sure we'll have more opportunities to talk about what we did and what it all means. I'm sure I didn't cover hardly anything about our experiences and about our about all of the places that we went, many places. I will make a list of them so that you will be able to see exactly the places that we were. And I think that's really it for today. Just wanted to give you an overview of what we saw, what we did, how it went, what our experiences were, and to just validate the work that we're doing in our centers, helping to raise the consciousness of one individual after another who comes to us for the sacraments and the initiations in Christian mysticism. And also knowing that we're doing that for as many people as want the way that we offer. Of course, there are many ways on the planet to do that. And then also on a bigger scale, to be raising consciousness to the level where our earthworks and our collective consciousness can be tipping the scales in the direction of the mind of the world rising up. And if you look, you can see it all around. Lots of people doing this kind of work or other kinds of work to create the more beautiful world our hearts know is possible. It's very inspiring to see that many people are turning to new ways of being, new ways of seeing, and it's very inspiring and exciting time to be alive. So I hope this has been useful to you and that it is inspiring to you. And we'll be doing more of these trips, and don't know where the next one will be, but it seems like we do 1 or 2 a year, so we can look forward to hearing what will be next. Thanks for listening. Peace to you. We'll talk soon.